Hey guys, my name's Crystal Kenny, and I'm in love with creating. All things artistic and imagination involved. I'm an American girl who chased her creative dreams all the way to Paris, France, making a living using photography. This podcast takes you inside the stories of all the artsy folks I've met along the way and gives you that extra push to discover your creative gifts. The desire to create is deeply inside each and every one of us, and I give you the tools and inspiration to find a new way of living a more creative life. This is La Vie Creative, the podcast. Claudine Hemingway is a descendant of famed writer Ernest Hemingway. We bumped into each other at a party and decided to team up and dive deep into French history, but with a twist, by bringing a spotlight to those lesser-known creatives in France. This is History with a Hemingway. So welcome back to Paris History Avec Hemingway. I'm back with Claudine, and today we are starting the beginning of a multi-part series about Genevieve, and I believe she's a saint. Claudine can tell us a lot more than I can, but I'll let her take it away from here.
Yeah, this is about Sainte Genevieve, and she was the patron saint of Paris, and she still is.
Still is.
So she is amazing. She is one of those characters in French history that I absolutely love. And then after I did research for about a week and a half on her, I love her even more now. So Sainte Genevieve was born around the year 420. So
she is old.
Long time ago. And she was born into a very rich family. She was born in Nanterre, which was at the time part of the Western Roman Empire. And so she was, obviously this is 5th century. So her family was very wealthy. And at 7 years old, St Germain, like the church in Paris, St Germain was a person, and Saint Loup de Troyes, they were on their way to England to go fight heresy and stopped in Nanterre. And so they ended up seeing this young girl, and she was people would just gather around her. And at the time, she's only 7, 8 years old. And so people were gathering around her, and they were really impressed by her. And she had told them that, she had sometimes had these people talking to her. She heard these voices of these different saints. So they were really, just kind of struck by her as just this young child. And so then her parents ended up actually later passing away. But right before that, she had wanted to go to church. And so her mother was like, no, you're not coming, because she was, telling people about how she's hearing these voices and they're telling her things. And people were like, girl, you're crazy.
You should probably stay home.
So her mom was like, no, you're too disruptive. It causes too many problems. You're not going to church. You are staying here. And so she was upset about that. And her mother slapped her. And so her mother ended up immediately becoming blind.
What?
Yeah. So as soon as her mother slapped her, she became blind. 2 years later, so she's blind for 2 years. 2 years later, her mother goes to get some water, and Genevieve picks it up and says, takes the water and makes a sign of the cross. And all of a sudden, her mother's eyes opened and she could see again.
Well, I can see why she's a saint.
Yeah. So that was her. Well, later, that's what becomes sainthood. You have to be, now it's even more of a, there's certain, Mother Teresa she didn't just die and then hey, guess what? Now you're a saint. There's all these, you have to prove there's miracles. And so that's her first miracle. In 438, her parents died, and she inherited all of her father's and family's property. And so she moved to Paris to go live with her godmother. And so while she was there, she's only about 17 or 18 years old, because of when she was born being the 5th century. There's a lot of different dates you could find. It'll say that she was born around the year 420. So, she was 17, 18-ish when she moved to Paris, or Lutetia as what it was called back then. And the bishop that was there asked her to be basically overlook and help out the virgins of the church, like the young girls of the church. So he bequeathed her with the veil. And it was like a ceremony. And told her that this was her job to guide and instruct these young women. So she gave herself to the church, and she basically was like, I am in this relationship with God, and I've given myself to the church. She ended up getting very sick, and she was in a coma for 3 days. And while she was in the coma, she had the vision of an angel leading her to heaven, telling her that her job in life was to instruct others.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, I'm going to play more closely to those dreams I have at night.
Maybe we're in the wrong profession.
I think our days of being in charge of the virgins of the church are done.
Yeah, I think we're way past our breaking point on that one.
Yeah, I think that maybe look for, like, again, 7-year-olds. Around 446, the rumors of her were all now around Lutetia, and everybody in what is now Paris was starting to think that this lady's crazy, which she dealt with as a child. But Saint Germain l'Auxerre came to Paris and held a public meeting telling people to trust her and to stop attacking her, and that she was this direct child of God and you should listen to her. And so, which was good timing, because 5 years later, Attila the Hun, and this is what she's kind of mostly known for, the Attila the Hun and 6,000 soldiers were slashing their way through Germany. On April 7th of that year, he attacked Metz and killed everybody in the city. So he was going through Strasbourg, then Verdun and Reims, and word was getting to Paris that he was coming. He was on his way there. So people were scared to death, of course. And I just imagine him as, like, Attila the Hun is this, like, great big, like, Sasquatch character.
Yeah, when you hear that name, it sounds very Sasquatchy.
It does, doesn't it? But everybody was like, we're getting out of here. We're moving up, I'm getting to safety. And so everybody was like, no, you need to stay, the members of the church. And so Sainte Genevieve kept telling him, like, no, stop, like, just stop and believe. And so she got everybody together, and Saint Germain l'Auxerre was there as well, and telling everybody, like, come to the edge of the Seine. And this was kind of where the Saint Germain l'Auxerre church is today. That's on that eastern end of the Louvre. And that is where they basically gathered everybody. And for days on end, they would just stand there and pray. And she would lead everybody in prayer, and with Saint Germain l'Auxerre. And Attila the Hun ended up going to Orleans and destroying that instead of coming to Paris. So
believing and praying does work.
So it worked to get him away from Paris, but he still attacked and killed another city.
That's because they didn't have their saint. They needed a saint.
They needed their own patron saint.
Yeah.
But in 470, she had admired another one of my favorites, is Saint Denis, who is the saint that is another patron saint of Paris. And he is the one known for his head getting chopped off. And then he picked it up and carried it and walked for about 5 miles to what is now the city of Saint Denis. But she, he was in the 3rd century. And she was a big fan of Saint Denis. And so she decided she wanted to have a basilica built at the place where he died, so in Saint Denis. So she helped raise the money. She actually helped also pay for it. She had, she was very wealthy from her parents that had died. So she actually gave some of her money too. And so the first church basilica that was at Saint Denis was built by Geneviève.
Fangirl.
And now, of course, the church that's there is it's not the same church, because that would, it'd be amazing if it could have survived that long. But the Basilique Saint Denis, that is just north of Paris, is absolutely fantastic. It is where the kings and queens of France are buried, most of them. There's usually, most of the tombs are empty because of the revolution. That's a whole nother story. But do go if you're in town, if you're in Paris for a period of time, do at least go there once. It's really, really amazing to go see. It takes a little bit to get there, but it's super easy on the metro to get up there, and it's really cool.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, and now you can think of Sainte Geneviève there when you're there too. So she ended up stepping up to save them yet again between the year 476 and 481. Childeric had decided that he was now going to attack Paris. He blocked the Seine so that nobody could maneuver down the Seine at all. And the people were starving. They had no bread. They had no food. They were starving to death. And so Geneviève ended up getting a boat and navigating through all of the blockades and going to the towns of Brie and Troyes and getting grain and bringing it back. She did this about 3 or 4 times. She paid for it herself, and they ended up bringing back this food so the people could eat, and she saved them from starving to death.
We like her.
Yeah, she's pretty amazing. So in 481, Childeric died, and his son Clovis became the king of the Franks. That's what they were at the time. This wasn't France yet, as we know it. At first, Clovis was going to also he thought about attacking Paris, and then he decided, oh, well, he'll just leave it alone. But when he was looking for a wife, his ambassador found this lovely gal named Clotilde in Burgundy, and Clotilde was a very devoted religious woman, and Clovis was not. So a few years later, Clovis and the king of the Franks, Treves, decided that they were going to go and do a siege of Almamnon. And they, of course, back then they were doing this. This is, it's Tuesday. Let's go attack this place. But they're very quickly outnumbered and in dire straits. Everybody, their men were all going to get killed. So Clovis decided to pray to the god of Clotilde to come to his aid. And if he was victorious, he would be baptized in his name. So his cousin ended up getting killed, but the army was completely, they ended up gathering enough people that they were able to attack the others and were victorious in there. So on December 24th in the year 499, he kept his promise and he was baptized at the Notre Dame de Reims, which is there in the Champagne region. It's another amazing Gothic church that you really should go see if you go to Champagne region. And so right there in front of Geneviève, he was baptized.
So they should be besties for this reason.
Yeah. And there's actually, when you go to the church, there's a plaque in the floor it says that this is where he was when he got baptized.
I need to look for more plaques. I feel like I don't look at my feet enough.
Yeah, you have to have your head on a constant swivel when you're anywhere in Paris. Just even walking down the street, you have to be looking up and down at all times.
Great advice.
But Clovis and Clotilde, his wife, ended up becoming very good friends with Sainte Geneviève. And they wanted, Clotilde decided that she wanted to have a church built and with Sainte Geneviève dedicated to St. Peter and Paul. And Clovis decided that, he would do this and they would build it at the top of this hill that's in Paris that we know now that most people don't even call it this, but it's where the Pantheon is. And that is the Montant Sainte Geneviève. So it's named after her now. And so in 511, on November 27th, Clovis died and he was buried inside this church that was dedicated to St. Peter and St. Paul. While the Basilique Saint-Denis was being built, Geneviève had gone out there to go see the work on it. And when she was there, this breeze came through and blew out all of the candles that were there at the work site. And when she walked in, she picked one up and it magically relit.
I mean, she's either a witch or a saint. Hard to tell.
She's one of the two. And all of these things, there's all of these little things you have to remember, because when I tell you about this one place in Paris that you could see a bunch of this stuff, it's all these stories come back to you. So you'll see a lot of these stories again in art, which is really cool. But when Clovis died, he was buried in the church. that was dedicated to St. Peter and Paul. And the next year, 5 weeks late, or not the next year, but 5 weeks later, Sainte Geneviève died on January 3rd, the year 512 or 520.
Hard to say. Long time ago.
But she was 89 years old. If it was 520, then she would have been about 100 years old. So I'm going to stick with the 512. She was buried next to Clovis in the Chapel of the Holy Apostles. And then in 520, they renamed the church to the Église Sainte Geneviève.
And everyone in Paris knows of her, I would think, somewhat. I mean, she's pretty famous here.
Pretty famous, and I'll give you lots of ways of where and places that you could see her. So she is pretty. I think between Sainte Geneviève, Denis, and Jeanne d'Arc, those are the three that a lot of people usually know, or at least can recognize. If you said their name, they would at least probably know who they are.
Mm-hmm.
But Queen Clotilde was because she was such a good friend to Sainte Geneviève. She, as soon as she died, she sat down and wrote everything about her life, like all of these stories. So basically, the only reason we know any of these stories of her life was because of Queen Clotilde.
I didn't know that's where we get all the information. I mean, it was so long ago. We needed somebody to capture all that.
Yeah, somebody had to capture. And Clotilde, another funny thing is Google spell check used to always want to change my name from Claudine to Clotilde, which seems just about as obscure as Claudine. So I always thought that was kind of funny. Like, really?
Cool, really?
That's more common?
I like that.
Yeah. But she wrote, these, so it was her path to sainthood and veneration. So when Clotilde died in 545, she was also buried next to her husband and her friend, Sainte Geneviève. The abbey, of course, would later be known as the Abbey Sainte Geneviève, and because it was built up even more around the church. And she laid there peacefully until 630. In the year 630, Saint Louis had her grave replaced with this beautiful golden sarcophagus that was covered with gold and gems.
That sounds fancy.
I know. I was like, I'll make mental note. That's what I would like.
Yeah.
So, and then in 845, she was moved to the city of Draville because Paris was at that time under siege again from the Normans. And so they wanted to keep her safe. So for 8 years, she left Paris, the city she guarded, which at that point, maybe they should have kept her because there's lots of things about her that she has done even until now. But in 865, her relics were removed again, and because of the siege and another siege, this time for the Vikings, and because they thought that her powers would keep the city safe. So that the Vikings wanted her out of there.
So everybody was believing in this woman.
Yeah, everybody believed in these stories. So in 1162, they thought somebody had gone into her casket and taken her head. And they thought it was the leader of the abbey at the time. So Louis VII had it investigated, and then the tomb was sealed up so they could never open it again.
So nobody's seen her in a while? Is she even in there?
Now sadly there is nothing. But in 1230, she ended up going to a goldsmith named Bonnard, redid her entire tomb because it just, the one that was done in the 12th century was falling apart, and people were picking off, as she kept getting moved around, they were picking off the gems of it, which, how can you blame them? And they ended up kept moving her around so much. So they ended up giving her a whole new tomb. And then again in 1614, Marie de Medicis had it rebuilt yet again.
So what happened to her?
So 80 years later, in May of 1694, after a terrible and dry winter in Paris, in all of France, a famine stretched across the country and people were dying. So Louis XIV agreed with the church leaders that had been pleading to hold a ceremony calling on the saint that saved them from the famine and everything else 1,000 years ago. So she saved them once because they were starving. So they thought, hey, maybe she could save us again.
So even in death.
Even in death. So on May 10th, the abbey was flooded with people demanding to see her reliquary so that they could pray on it and basically ask, for her to save them. So for 19 days, people would come in there, and the crowds got bigger and bigger, and then it was still just dark. More needed to be done, and when the kings again asked if they could do it, so finally they decided on May 27th, 1694, after a day of fasting, the church told everybody, you cannot eat. You have to have completely fast for 24 hours. And they invited the poor and the invalid to come to the abbey to be there.
Oh, nice.
And early in the morning, her reliquary was cleaned and polished as the bells rang outside, announcing that this was about to start. So, and this whole process, I was just like fascinated by this. It's so cool. So under heavy security, all the people arrived, and, her reliquary was all ready. But down the way at Notre Dame du Paris, they were getting a reliquary ready. The reliquary is Saint Marcel. And because Saint Marcel had to go and ask Sainte Geneviève, basically, if you could come outside.
What?
Yeah. So the bishops and the canons left Notre Dame with these relics. They walked across through the Rue Nouvelle Notre Dame, across the Petit Pont to the Rue Galande and Place Maubert, and up the Monton Saint Geneviève. The procession took at this point like 3 hours to slowly walk through the street. So they had all of these clergy members and nuns and everybody else with them from the church. They carried the relics of the saint, and they arrived at the abbey where there was the Louis wasn't there, but a bunch of the court members of Versailles were there. They were all there waiting, and as Saint Marcel arrived, he was placed next to her reliquary on the altar, and then a mass was held with the two of them sitting there.
Wow.
In their boxes.
Yeah.
And then with the supervisors of Notre Dame, both of them were taken now at this point back down to Notre Dame, with Saint Marcel leading the way and Saint Geneviève right behind him. Somebody tried to also add another reliquary to it, Saint Lucien, and he was supposed to be carried along with them, and it caused everything into like total disarray. Like, we could, this is the way it's done. Like, it's like, are they distributing the powers? So right. With all the people of the church, they went down, and there was also, like, they get back to Notre Dame, there's different government officials from the Hotel de Ville that were there. They were all carried back down to down the Rue Etienne de Grès and the Rue Saint-Jacques, across the Petit Pont and into Notre Dame. And they had a full, huge, the long mass. It's like this 2-hour mass there while the two of them were there. The entire process ended up, in the procession, ended up leaving Notre Dame. At this point, they walk across the bridge, and this is that little tiny bridge that's now closed off right now. They walked across the bridge. Saint Marcel took her to the bridge, basically bid her adieu, and then she ended up walking back to the abbey and being interred back into the Abbey of Saint Geneviève.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah. So as they were walking, the sky started to get very dark. As soon as she got into the church, the sky opened up and it started raining finally.
It worked.
So it worked. She saved them yet again, even after her death. So for a week, her reliquary was left out there in the abbey so people could come in. And after a few weeks, the price of wheat fell and people were eating again. They ended up, nobody was dying of starvation. There was other miracles that happened because of it. A young girl that had kissed her shrine that was paralyzed was no longer paralyzed. There was even a handful of people that had been cured of their blindness by just touching it. There was a Duc de Noailles was fighting this siege with the Spaniards. He ended up, they looked bad. It was bleak. He wasn't doing well. And after her reliquary had come out, he ended up was victorious and beat them.
So we all need a reliquary.
We all need a reliquary. It's a piece of like their bone, like their finger. But thousands and thousands had lined the streets to do this. And the entire thing from start to finish took 14 hours.
14 hours?
Yeah. And it's not far. I mean, if you stand there where, the church no longer is there, but there, and we'll tell you about all the different reminders up there now, but it's basically like a stone's throw away down the hill to Notre Dame. It's not far.
Wow. So they were really taking their time with the reliquary.
Yeah, I mean, it's like what she had to have time to like cast out her wishes onto everybody or something. But in June 1725, her relics were called on again, this time because it had been raining too much. And so on July 5th, 1725, the same ceremony was held from Notre Dame to the Abbey Saint Germain. And after that, the rain stopped. So these events, there's different ones. There's the one that's the full procession, and then there's also the ones that are called just the descent, which is how they would just hang her reliquary above the altar in the church, and then they would have royalty and leaders would be there depending on what the reason is they're doing this, so it wouldn't be leaving the church. But over the time between the year 1500 and 1693, 73 different events where her reliquary was brought out, 36 times for weather, 14 times because of attacks on France. And the other times were either for heresy, the health of the crown, so the king or queen, and then 3 other times that were unknown. But from 1694 to 1794, for that 100-year period, it would happen 47 times, 28 times for health.
For health?
So like the people like famines and, things that were going on, a plague or something like that. On August 17th, 1744, Louis XV was in Metz, and he was leading the troops in a war in Austria and fell deathly ill. He prayed to Sainte Genevieve to save his life, and if he survived, he would build a church to her.
Wow.
And next week we'll tell you all about that.
Well, I can't wait to tune in and get more information about this fascinating woman in French history, maybe the oldest woman we talked about.
She's pretty awesome, though, isn't she?
She's pretty awesome. And don't forget to tune in, guys, next week, because this is a multi-part series. And if you know about this woman in France, I feel like French people will respect you so much more. And don't forget to check out Claudine's live tours every weekend on Sundays. You can go to her website to learn more, and tune in next week.
Thank you for listening to Paris History Avec a Hemingway. If you want to find out some more, you could always find me on my Instagram page, Claudine Bleu Blanc Rouge, and that's BLEU, as in the French way to spell it. And each day I post a daily history lesson about a person or a place or something in Paris, or it's lots of fun facts. And then also at ClaudineHemingway.com, where you can also sign up for my newsletter there.